All right, welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to be going over the Django user authentication process. So in this lesson, we're going to create an abstract user, and then we'll create a relationship between the user and a couple of tasks. In the lesson objectives, we have creating a Django application, which we already did. We have a Django application and a Django project. I'll go over the overview after that shortly after this. Then we have creating an abstract user model. He'll have an email, a name, a username, and the required fields. Then we want to add the user model onto our project in settings PY. I'll go over this shortly. Then we have our intro to Postman, where we'll see Postman, how that works and how it interacts with Django. And then we have user functions. So we have creating a user, meaning that a user can sign up to our application. The user can log in which authentication and login will happen at the same time. And then we'll go over serializers, or how the serialize function from Django core serializers works. And then we'll go over the user logout and how that ends his session. Then after that, we'll create the model for a task. We'll build a relationship between the task and a user. It'll have a title, a description, and then we'll register things onto our admin site so that we can manually put in some data. And we could then ping it with Postman to get some information. And then if the time allows still, we'll go straight into template rendering and how we could see it in the front end. Awesome. Does anyone have any questions over what we will be covering today? Okay, perfect. So let's get started. After installing this project and this application, went over to settings.py. We got our user auth project, and actually that should be our user auth app. So that's a good thing to go over. And we want to also come over to our database, change it to PostgreSQL. In my case, I created a database called user auth DB. And currently there's no migrations on it. After that, I went over to the project URLs, and the project URLs I brought in the include function and included our application. From there, it goes over to our application URLs, and our application URLs, we brought in Django.urls and imported path from there. And then we also bring in our views. Currently, the only view that I have existing is user sign up. It's at the end of the sign up URL. And if I go to my views, currently the user sign up is only passing. So let's start off with our model. And then from our model, we'll work all the way to our front end. So in our models, to be able to bring in a user, Django has a user library that we could use, or a user model that we can use. But instead of using Django's built-in user model, we're going to create our own, right? It's safer because if we're just using the built-in Django model, then anyone who could read the documentation can technically ping our site and get information about each individual user. Whereas if we create our own, it may make it a little harder for them to be able to manipulate the data. So now we'll go into Django contrib. And in Django contrib, there's an auth. And from there, we can bring in models. So these are authenticated models. And what we want to do is import abstract user. All right. We're going to start our class. And it's going to be abstract user. And then I could even press the command key, click on abstract user, and see a couple of different fields that go into abstract user. So he has some username validators. So we know that he's going to need a username. It looks like there's a model.tar field aligned with that username. We have an email field. We have an is staff. So we can make him staff to give him special privileges. And we have an is active. So if we want to just make sure that somebody's not able to log into the site, regardless whether they have an account or not, we could turn this into false, and then they will no longer be able to log into our site. They have a first name and last name field, but the majority of these fields are optional. So here at the very bottom, where it specifies required fields, this tells us that the two fields it will definitely require will be the email field. And then even though it doesn't specify the password field, it is assumed by Django that you will provide a password every time you try to create a user. Awesome. So we need an email, just like we said before. And this is going to be a models.email field. Otherwise, we'll get an error if we don't provide the email field. And I'm going to make it blank being false. And I also want to null false because I want to make sure that I actually receive data. And since for each individual user should have its own independent email. So I'm going to make it unique true, not false. And then for name, I want a char field. And in this char field, I want a max length of 255. Same thing. I want to actually get this information. And so I'm going to make the ability of it to be false or blank. I mean, the ability of it to be null or blank false. And I'm just put a couple of spaces here for my own sanity. Okay. Perfect. So now I have my email and I have my name. So now I want a username field and it suggests it to me. But this username field, instead of creating an entire username, I'm just going to tell my app user that every time I create a username field or every time it's looking for a username to reference the email field up above. And then now I can just use my email as the username. And then after that, all we need is required fields. And we could just leave an empty parentheses, and that empty parentheses will represent all, meaning that all of these fields will be required in order to create a new user. And let's just give it a Thunder method so that we can see it in the front end. I mean, in the admin site. Perfect. And then let's return an F string of self.name. And we want self.email as well. Okay, perfect. So that's all I'm going to need for my app user. And now that I have that, I can make migrations. Okay, so we got an error, and this error is coming from app users. So when I go to my settings, if I scroll throughout my settings, I see that there's nothing specifying which app user I want to use. So what I need to do is at the very bottom of my settings, I need to add a field called Auth user model. And then here in this Auth user model field, I'm going to specify the name of the application. So user auth app. And then I want it to use the app user model. So now it allowed me to make migrations because it knows what the abstract user is going to be for this project. And now I can migrate. I can now create a new terminal and go into PSQL. I believe it was auth user DB. Let's try that. Nope, wasn't that. User auth DB. I was close. Okay, great. So now I can go and see all of my relationships. I can see all of the Django built-in models, and then I see my user auth app user being included in there. And let's say I want to see all of the fields that are in there. So let's go into user app.user. Okay, so now we see all the fields. We got ID, password, last login. Is he or is he not a super user? The username, the first name, the last name, all the fields, even though we didn't specify them, they were still added onto our Django model. So let's actually bring our database up here. We'll no longer need settings. And we could leave the URLs. We won't need this anymore. Okay, so we just went over how to create an abstract user. So to cover that one more time, when we create an abstract user, we're going to bring in the abstract user from Django contrib auth models, meaning that it's an authenticated model, or will need authentication in order for the model to work properly. We have an email field, which we made unique to every user so that we can use it as a username. In username field, we're referencing the email in quotation marks. For the name, this is something that I personally added for my users, so they will have a name. I gave them a max length if it was null, and if it's blank capabilities, and I made them both false. And then I gave it all fields are required in order to, all of these fields above are required in order to create an app user. Right? Notice that I didn't specify password, but if I look here, password is still one of my cells. All right. So let's go into actually interacting with our views. So in our views, we're going to actually bring in a couple of things before we start. So I want to make sure that I bring in JSON response. So I'm going to go from Django HTTP import JSON response. I also want to make sure that I bring in Django REST frameworks. So I'm going to say from REST frameworks, decorators, import API view. I am also going to need the ability to bring in my models and call my models. So from .models, import, and I want all. And then lastly, I want to import JSON because I know I'm going to need it while I'm working. Okay, great. So now I got a user sign up. Can anyone tell me what type? Oh, I'm sorry. I got a question on chat. Is abstract user just a dummy user? Could you define your question a little better?
Oh yeah, sorry. I have like during the assessment, or I played around with users just to see how. I didn't get that far, but when I was creating it, I used the same exact format as you did, except I imported a user and did a one-to-one field to create the user. And this was a completely different setup. I just didn't know what the difference was.
The difference between user
abstract user versus user, yeah, importing them in.
Okay, so where did you import user from? Did you also import it from the auth models library?
Yeah, it's exactly the same, except for you imported abstract user and I imported user, and then I didn't do any of the other extra steps. I just basically did the user equals models dot one-to-one field, and then in the parentheses it was calling the user from the import.
Right. So that's it. That would be the main difference, right? When you're using the user model that Django provides for you, there's a lot of assumed fields that are going to be provided for you. And because they are assumed and they're documented in the Django documentation, there's a lot of backend libraries that are happening behind Django that will allow you to just create users easily with less of alterations to the fields. When as you're using abstract user, you can manipulate some of the data and specify exactly what it is that you want for each one of them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So there's the generic user that comes with it. So okay, yeah. There's a lesson part of this. Cool. All right.
Awesome. I lost my way. Okay, there you go. Views. Perfect. So we're in views, and then we have this sign up process, right? So what type of requests do you guys think we should receive for somebody signing up? It's something that should only happen once. So with that said, what do you guys think this should be?
What was the question again?
What type of requests we should be receiving for this view?
HTTPS.
No, like get or post. We're registering the user.
Right. So we're going to be creating
post.
a user. Awesome.
Post.
So let's go with post. All right, so as we go into post, let's say that I want to, there's things in the request that I want to be able to see. So for now, I'm going to print request.data. And then I'm going to return a JSON response of success or success and make that true for now. Okay, great. So now I can try running my server. Okay, so everything works well. And I know that this is tied into the URL of sign up. So now let's actually bring in Postman into the mix. Okay, so in Postman, instead of pinging this location, I'm going to go ahead and copy this HTTP address that's provided to me in my server area. I'll paste it there. And then I know that I want sign up right afterwards. I know that I want to send a post request and in form data inside of the body. I'm trying to send an email, a password, and a name, which I already provided. For you guys, if you guys don't have it, you'll just click here in key, and then you guys could put whatever you want and add the value and so on. So it knows that I'm trying to send an email, password, and name. So now, and when I click send, I see success is true. And here, when I printed the request.data for my views, and let me just make sure that I can pull that up here. When I printed the request.data for my views, I see that there's a dictionary with email, there's password, and there's name. Perfect. So now let's grab that. Let's say email is equal to request.data email. I want my password to be equal to request.data password. And then I want my name. Okay, so now I have the information that I need. And what I want to do now is actually be able to create a user, right? So now we're going to use the contrib library again. So let's go into from Django .contrib .auth. And I want to import authenticate. I want to import login. And I want to import logout. And now what I want to do is create this model. So I'm going to say try, and then I'm going to say new user is equal to app user dot objects dot create user. And I'm going to specifically use create user because when I use create user and I pass in a password field, it's going to hash it for me so that it doesn't actually register the actual password into the database. If I use create, I'll see the exact text in the database, whereas when I use create user, it will hash it. So now I can say username, and I want that to be my email. Then I want email equal to email. And then I want name to be my name and password to be my password. Okay, so now if all of that succeeds, I can return a JSON response of success. And then I can say, let's go with, I'm just going to include name. Your user was created. And we also want an exception. So accept exception as E so that I can see the error. I'll print E and then return JSON response. And then here I'll say success. And I'll just make this false. Okay, so I'll go through the try, I'll go through the accept. And then we see that this return never gets triggered. Perfect. Okay, so my Django server already reloaded. Now when I click send, oh, hello. There you go. So I get success. Francisco Avila, your user was created. Okay. When I go to SQL, and let me open this up a little bit so that we can see it better. And I load SQL. So I see my ID. I know this is a little hard to read. I see my ID. I got number 1, my password, and then I see my password being hashed. So this is all my encoded password. I see a super user, it's false. My username, francisco@outlook.com. And then there's a name portion, which we see later on. And then we see Francisco Avila being printed as well. There's the email portion. And then the date joined, which shows us today's date. Is he active? Yes, he is active. And he is not staff, and he is not a super user. And just like that, I created a new user. So now let's say my new user was created, right? And I told it to be unique. So technically, if I try to send this post request one more time, I receive a false. And I receive a false because since this user was already created with this email, it won't let me create another account. And that right there is how you do a user sign up. Does anyone have any questions over user sign up?
Yes, I have a question. Where does the password get saved? If you're using create user to, so that the password doesn't actually get saved into the database, where does it get saved?
So the password is saved on the database. It's just encrypted, right? Or hashed. So now whenever I go to actually log in and I pass in the password, it's going to compare the hash password to the password that I'm passing in. And it's going to unhash it in the backend to ensure that it's actually the correct password and then allow me to authenticate my user. Does that answer your question, Angel?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So let's move on into sign in. So sign in will also be an API view of a post
Francisco, real
request.
quick.
Of course.
Sorry, I was typing a question while you were talking to Angel. So what's the point of this JSON response? Is it just to like prove to yourself that it's doing what you want it to? Or is there like a fundamental reason why we want to return a JSON response?
So the point of my JSON response and why I like using JSON responses is because when I return that dictionary in the front end, I think I've demonstrated it before when we're using Axios, I can check the success field. And if the success field is anything other than false, then I can have a desired behavior to happen, right? Whereas I return any other type of response, I may have to put a little bit of extra logic to get my follow-up behavior to happen on the front end. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Of course. All right, so now we got our sign-in process. We bring in the API view of post, and now let's go into the user sign-in. So let's say the and probably don't want to use capitals. Say user sign-in. It's going to take in the request, and now in the request, I know that I'm going to want the email. And then I want to grab the request.data and grab an email from data. I want to grab the password. It's the same thing, request.data and password. Okay, so I grab both of those fields. And after I grab both of those fields, I actually want to show you guys something that request does. So this part's really cool. When you're using Django REST frameworks, if you need to withhold the type of request that you're using, or you need to withhold the method, Django REST frameworks hides the request itself inside of the request component as underscore request. I know it's a, let me connect this to the URLs and then return a fake JSON response real quick. So return JSON response. Okay,
You got a quick typo there too.
on
Singing.
line 24. Boom. I always do that. Awesome. If you guys watch my video on this lesson for Sierra, I did that like 7 times. Okay, so we got sign in, and then we go to URLs, and let's bring in that sign in. We want path, sign in. Then use dots user sign in, and I want to give the name of sign in. Okay. Perfect. So now let's switch this up to go to sign in. I am no longer going to need my name to go into the body. And let's send that post request. So when I send it, I see success is true. And here we get the WSGI request of post and sign in. All right. So that's how it saves it. And it's just basically showing the method that was sent and to what URL. And if we wanted to go further in there, we could even go into .body, and it could show us the body of the request. But instead of showing us the body and the request JSON readable, how we have it up here, right? Because we're already able to treat it as a dictionary and grab it. It's going to show it to us in the binary string portion, where we would have to use JSON loads to be able to utilize it. And the entire reason why I just went over all of that is because when you use authenticate, and actually this will be user equals authenticate. And authenticate, you're going to need to pass in the request. Oh, my apologies. So in authenticate, first you need to pass in the username. And in username, you'll need to pass in the email. And then we'll need a password. And here, make a password. So the authentication process is going to go through. It's going to try to say, hey, does this email exist in the database? Okay, the email exists. Is the password correct? Perfect. The password is correct. So then after that, it authenticates the user. The user is not signed in. He's just authenticated. So now that the user is authenticated, I'm going to say if user is not none. Because if the user is not authenticated, then the user variable will just be none. Whereas if it is authenticated, it will return the user as an authenticated variable or as an authenticated user. And then I'll say and user is active, meaning that my active field in my user is not false. Then I'm going to try. And this is where I'm going to call in the login function. And in the login function, I'm going to pass in request underscore request. And I am also going to pass in the user. So let's take a look at the login function. So the login function needs to know what type of request we're taking in the backend, and it needs to know the user, right? So I need to pass in the request that I passed. Sorry, this backend portion doesn't matter. I need to make sure that I pass in the request itself as a WSGI and not as an SQL query, and not as a query set that Django REST framework returns. So since I need to pass it in as a WSGI, I pass it in as the request underscore request. And then after that, I pass in the user that is authenticated. Boom. So now we could go back to views. So once the user is successfully logged in, then I can return a JSON response of sign in, make that true. And then I need to make sure I see my exception. So I'm going to print my exception. And then I'll return a JSON response of sign in and make that one false. Since I have that if statement checking if it's authenticated, I want to make sure that I return something every time. So I'm just going to return the false of sign in if this if statement fails. Awesome. So still have my email and password. Now, when I go ahead and send my request comes back with sign in is true. So now my user signed in, and we can see that cookies now has 2 inside of there. So I got my Csrf token, which I need to make sure that I add. And I also have my sessions. So now I could go to headers, scroll down to where Csrf token is located. So I got authorization, and my Csrf token. So for authorization, I'm going to include my session ID. Notice how it's different, and this is because I was working with a separate user last time. And then the Csrf token is different because I was working on a separate project last time. Okay, so Csrf token is Django overall. Authorization is the session ID of my individual user. All right, so now I got my authorization, my Csrf token, and my headers. It's all being included, so I can continue on with the application. So now let's send a GET request. And in this GET request, let's say I just want to know who the current user is, because it's awesome that the user signed in, but that doesn't really tell me who the current user is. And actually, before I moved on, I covered quite a bit in the user sign in. Does anyone have any questions over user sign in? Easy peasy. Awesome. Let's keep pushing then. So now let's go to URLs and let's bring in the current user path. And I want to go use current user. And then I want to name it current user. I go to my views, and now let's create that. So this is going to be a GET request only because I only want to get who the current user is. I don't want to do any type of post or put. So now let's say current user. This is going to take in the request. And after it takes in the request, I'm going to say if request.user is authenticated, because if he's logged in, he's also authenticated. So the user in the, actually, let me see, print request dot user. And let's stop there for now. And let's return a JSON response of user being non. And let's send that GET request real quick. So I'm going to change it to GET. Change this to current user. And now I'm going to send my request. And when it comes back, if I go back to the body, I see that the user is null. Okay. But then when I print the user that's inside of the request, I see Francisco Avila and his current email, the dunder method that I gave the user. So now that the user is logged in and he's authenticated and his session has begun, every time there's a request that comes in, I can access the user that's sending that request by request.user. Awesome. So now that I have that, I can say that command X. So now I can say that if the request.user is authenticated, then I want the user info, which is what I'm going to give back to the front end. And this is when I want to bring in Serializer. So let's go from Django, and I think this is core. Got serializers, import serialize. There you go. Okay, and then what serializers do is basically they grab information from the database and they serialize it, meaning that they make it readable for us, because right now everything in our database is just database query, and when we send it, it comes back as a query set rather than an actual string or binary string that we can read. So when I use Serializer, it's going to actually turn it into binary string. So let's go serialize, and let me just go into the Serializer portion. So in the Serializer portion, it tells me that it's going to need a format. So what type of format do I want to receive my information back? In our case, we're going to use JSON. It's going to ask me what query set is it that you want me to work with. We're going to give it the request.user model so that it can return to me the values from the user. And then it tells me options. And if you guys remember when we were learning OOP, this asterisk method basically just stands for like what from the dictionary, what keys from the dictionary is it that you want me to grab for you, right? So now when I go back into my views, excuse me. What's the key combo to jump source function? I click the command sign and then I click on the function itself. So I hold down this command and then click on the function, or you could do control like Daniel said. Okay, awesome. So now I'm going to say JSON. So there's my first argument. I want a JSON response to come back from my serializer. And then I also want my serializer to work with request.user, which is actually the model. And let me just bring this little piece of notes here in. Okay, so I have my request.user, I have my query, and now I want my options to be, and I'm going to specify options by specifying a fields argument. And here I just want my name, and I want my email. I don't want my password to be sent back to the front end because, well, that wouldn't be practical, and that would probably compromise my user. So now I'm just going to print user info for now. Again, let's just send this GET request. And for user info now, we see a JSON response with the model, the user that I'm using. So it tells me which model it is. It tells me the primary key and the fields that I requested. So I got my email field with the email, with the corresponding email, and I got my name with the corresponding name of that user. But this is JSON response, so I can't do something like grab the email from it. If I send this, it's going to return error because it's going to tell me that the string indices must be integers. So when it tells me that it's a string indices, that tells me that this is a JSON string. So now, since I know it's a JSON string, I know that I can use JSON.loads. So let's create this as user info, and let's just make it workable. And now I can use user info, put that inside parentheses, and use JSON.loads. And now I can print user info workable and just grab the name. So now when I send this GET request, list indices must be integers, JSON.loads takes in the user info. Let's see. Oh, so list indices must be integers. So it's telling me that this is a list. So let's just print out workable first. Okay, so this is a list. So if I wanted to go into the list and grab the user, I can now grab the name. Send my request. It tells me name doesn't exist. So let's take a look.
Index 1, not 0.
Well, it should be a fields name, right? Name was within fields.
Yes, sir. Awesome. So then I want to go into fields. And then inside of fields, I want to go into name. Oops. Unpacking the dictionary. P3. Oh no, I messed
F1 46.
Yes. There you go. I finally got it. Okay, so now we can actually see the print statement coming back, where it's printing back Francisco Avila. Awesome. And then let me take off this print statement here. Okay, great. So now that I know that's coming back, I can return a separate JSON response. And in this JSON response, I can say, let's say user information. And let's turn user info into user info workable at the index 0, so that I receive this in the front end. And then let's make this an else statement. Shouldn't be necessary, but just in case. Okay, so we send this, and now we see that Postman spits back my user info, tells me which model it belongs to, my primary key, and my individual email function, and my email and my name, just like I told it to. And that is current user. Does anyone have any questions over how to get the current user?
Could you briefly explain the why we're serializing again, or what exactly it's converting from?
Yeah,
As a
of
function
course.
serialize.
So the function serializer is grabbing the request.user, which is going to be the current user that's currently signed in and actively using our site, right? So it sends in the authorization as a session ID, and it identifies the session ID and grabs our user so that we can see it in the request. So now that we have our user, if we wanted to return our user information, we would need to serialize it, meaning that we would need it to be pulled from the database as a JSON response. And then we would have to tell it specifically which fields to work with. Does that answer your question, Daniel?
Sort of, like, because why can't we just work with the response from the database? Like, I thought we were doing that before without serializing.
So we can't just work with the response from the database. So let's say that I wanted to do that, right? Let's say I want to do user and data, then that equals, I think it's app user, the objects like it, and then where ID is equal to, let's start user dot, I think it's PK. Let's go with like, oh, I should probably print that. So let's print user from data, send this GET request. Okay, so I see the print statement there, and that's my dunder method, right? But let's say I take off the dunder method so that we can see what actual type of response it is. And let's go back to my views, and then let's just print request.user. Okay, so now when I send the request.user, we see that it only sends me back the email field, right? And actually, I wonder why it is doing that. Models, boom, okay. So we see that it only gives me back my email field when I go to print it, right? But now let's say that I wanted to return just the user from data. When I go to click this, it's going to give me an error saying that it's not JSON serializable. So that's where the serializer comes in. I'm serializing it into JSON format so that I can then spit it back into my front end as JSON serializable. Does that answer your question, Dan?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And I think it might be printing the email before. That might be the dunder method from the whatever model we inherited from abstract user.
Oh, from abstract user?
There might be a dunder method on that for the string. I'm just guessing, but I thought we were accessing certain fields off the database without having to serialize. Like, I'm pretty sure we did that for the last assessment, but
Yeah, so there's
I can see
definitely
how the
other
data
ways.
is-
Yeah, there's definitely other ways to do it. Like, for example, you could turn it into a list and then call the list at index 0 and do a couple of different things to be able to turn it into JSON serializable, and it just turns into typecasting. But the proper way of doing it is going through the serializer from Django contrib. All right. So now we got,
Yeah, follow-on
Oh.
question with that. I
Go ahead.
get the serialized turns it into JSON. That's what you're gonna be sending it over.
Mhm.
But JSON loads, I thought we were using that to get it into a dictionary from the request body. And if it's already in JSON, what is that line doing?
So, do you remember when you would go and this is correct. Why aren't you working? Oh, you're not reading it correctly. Okay, there you go. So do you remember when we were working with the bodies of request, and let's say, for example, in the form, and it would come in with a B and then the quotation marks, right? Making a binary string. But it wasn't actual JSON readable, or it wasn't something that I could work with as JSON. So although it is JSON and I could send this serialized data to the front end as a JSON string, it would be exactly that, just a string in JSON. Right? That's the way JavaScript would recognize it. By running JSON loads into it, into user info, I am now turning it into a list with a dictionary data set inside of it. And that's what allows me to access the index 0 and pull out the dictionary when I send the GET request.
Okay, so you are turning it back into an object or something. Okay, because we're pulling out the first one. Now I get it. Now I get it. I thought we were just doing something else with the JSON before having it out. Okay, got
Okay.
it.
Perfect. So that is our current user model. And now we got our view. So now we got our current user. And the last thing we need to do is be able to sign out as a user. And again, when I'm signing out, this should also be a post request. Let's go into user sign out. It's going to take in the request. And this one's actually really easy because we don't have to manipulate very much. All we need to do is log out on request. And I'll go over what that's actually doing. And then return baseline response, log out, or I guess I should say sign out. Make it true. You have to send JSON across the wire, and this is, oh, okay, perfect. Wait, is that a question? Hold up, let me read the chat real quick. You have to send JSON across the wire, and this is because all these front-end tools can't work with query sets directly, right? It needs to be JSON or some other more predictable format that query sets due to the front end not knowing what database we're using. Okay, so any communication happening between the front end and back end should always happen in a JSON dictionary format. And that's why every time when we send back a response, it sends it back in a dictionary format. Does that answer your question, Daniel? I'm not sure if I'm fully understanding the scope of your question. Okay, perfect. So now I'm going to bring in the exception as E. I'm going to print E. Okay. And then I'm going to return a JSON response where sign out is false. All right, and let's take a look at what sign out or logout is actually doing. So logout takes in the request and then it gets attributes. So this get attributes goes into the request, pulls out the user, and then it says that if the user is authenticated, then it's going to basically sign it out. I can't really speak intelligently about all of the things that are going on here. But up to this point, what it's doing is grabbing the user and then checking if it's authenticated. And if it is true, then it goes into these other portions. Otherwise, the user is none. And it just returns the none, which means that the logout doesn't do anything. Otherwise, I don't want to lie to you guys, so I'm just going to be 100% honest and transparent. I have no idea what this is doing, but it logs me out. Perfect. So that sends our request, but I think I don't have a URL for it. So let's make that path. And let's go with sign out. Yes, I did spell that correctly. And then let's go with use.user sign out and make it the name sign out. Okay. Da-da-da. Sign out. And then I need to make sure that I send a post request. And now I can click send. And I see my sign out is true. So now if I go to current user and I send a get request, technically at this point, my headers would no longer have the authorization. So now I send this and I see that my user is null because there is no current user being active. And that right there is my entire views for the user model. Okay, so now that I have all of this, let's create some tasks that will be linked to our user. So let's go with class, make the task, and then we want models.model. I want a title. Blank, false, no, false, and then I want the max length to be 255. Oh, hello. And then description. Let's make this a text field. And then lastly, we need it to be linked to a user. So let's do a foreign key, since many tasks can belong to one user. And in this case, we'll access the app user. And we want models.cascade, or sorry, on delete. Models.cascade. Okay. And actually, let's give this a thunder method. And let's return an F string, or let's just return self.title for now. Actually, I also want to know who the user is, so let's bring in the user. All right, so now I can make migrations. It created my model task. I can migrate. And now since I have that going, let's say I want to make a couple of dummy data. So now I'm going to go into my admin PY, and I'm going to say admin.site.register, and then it's going to take in a list, and I want to bring in all my models. And let's say I want my app user and I want my tasks. Okay. And then I want to create a super user. Let's give it a password. It's probably just 2 shower reward. It's fine. I don't mind. Let's go with yes. Missing one positional argument, username. Okay. Well, then ask me for my username. I wonder if I'm doing something wrong here. Interesting. So I am doing something wrong because when I'm creating the super user, it's telling me maybe I could specify. Nope, that didn't work. It's more than likely because I have my abstract user being made. And since I have my abstract user, it's trying to figure out how to do that. So let's make this a super user. So let's go to my views. And how could I do that? Let's see. So I'm going to say if request dot data super make that false. If request that data dot super, then I want super user equal to request dot data super. And when I go to create it, I'm going to let me check out this abstract model real quick to ensure what the correct naming for super user would be. Is tab is active, object state joined. Let's go. So last name is staff is active is super. That's what it's called. Make that equal to super user. Oh, and I never even saved this. Yeah, same. Save. Okay. So this is going to check if there's a super data. If there is a super data, it's going to set that to the super user, which will either be true or false. And then it will give that parameter to my super user. So let's do that. Let's make this a post. Let's go for sign up. And let's now go to the body. Let's change that email. gmail.com has my password. And then I need the super part. And let's make that true. Okay, so now when I send this, this should be a post request. I should probably run my server. Okay, so success was false. That didn't work. App user got unexpected keyword is super. Okay. You're saying it's is super user? Let's try it out. Oh, nice. It is. It's super user. Okay, perfect. So now I have a super user at the email of francisco@gmail.com. And my password is Francisco. All right. So now let's do this real quick. I apologize for the background, everyone. And actually, it's already 8 o'clock and we've done quite a bit, but I'm sure people want to see this. Okay, so Francisco at gmail.com. No, I swear that's what he sent. Please enter the correct email and password for a staff account. Oh, perfect. So now not only does he have to be a super user, but he also has to be staff. Ooh. And I think that one was is staff, right? This is getting kind of long. So let's say is staff and make that equal to staff. Okay, so staff, make that true. And we're going to need another type of email. So let's say Avila. And let's send this post request. Okay, he was created. So Francisco at Avila. Let's go here. Just go to admin. Francisco at Avila.com. Let's go with Francisco. All right, we're finally in. Okay, perfect. We've been going for quite a bit. So let's take a pause. It's currently 10:03. And let's go for a 10-minute break. Is that good with everyone? Perfect. So let's do a 10-minute break and then let's come back at 10:13. I'll see you all soon. All right, welcome back, everyone. So just a quick overview. When we were working with the Django user model, when we created the abstract user, if we want to use the admin page, when the user is signing up, the user actually has to have a couple of different properties. So he needs to be a super user. Currently, I started with a value of false, and then I also have a staff with a value of false. Then I have these if statements saying that if request.data for super exist, then it's going to assign the super user to the value of request.data in super. Likewise for staff. So in this case, I sent true for both of them, making both super user and staff true, which allowed me to now log into the admin page. All right. So let's pick up from the admin page. So in the admin page, I got tasks and I got users. Say I want to look at users. I got a couple of different Francisco Avilas because they all just have the different emails, but we know this one right here is our staff. So now let's say we look at tasks, and tasks is currently empty. So I want to add one. Let's say I'm going to say, I don't know, eat breakfast, scrambled. I can't spell today. See, scrambled eggs with coffee. Now it's going to ask me which user it is. So let's say this one. Or actually, let's go with the one that's currently signed in. Or currently that we just created. So let's go with Francisco Avila at Francisco at Avila.com. Okay. So now let's say we want to save and add another one. So then I want to also sleep. Get 8 hours of sleep at least. once this year. Again, gonna go with Francisco and save and add another one. If only if it was that easy. Yeah. And then the next one will be, I don't know, let's say, I don't know, eat dinner. Hopefully that's the right steak. Actually, that's embarrassing. Let's change it up for something I can actually spell. So let's make hamburger.
It was correct.
Okay, perfect. Hamburger with the soda, because fitness is our passion. And then, oh, so it tells me that it needs a foreign key. Let's make that. And then just one last one. I don't know what to put here. It's Pop, Minnesota. Let's see. Code some more. Make good code, better code. There you go. Boom. And we go to save. Okay, so now I got all these tasks that belong to that one specific user. All right. And then let's just add tasks for other users. So not visible. Should not see this from other users. And I'm just going to copy that so that I can make it again. And let's give this one to the Gmail account one. Save and add another. Visible. And let's go with the Outlook account. Okay, so now I got all these different tasks that I've created and I got them all in my templates. But I think now it's time, you guys can see the relationships. We're making a one-to-many, right? So there's one user can have many tasks. I'm not, oh, look at that. Oh no, these are user permissions. Hello. So I can see other fields that I have with users that I can alter, but they're not necessary right now. But now let's go into template rendering. Let's go into the good stuff. We should have enough time. All right, I'm gonna try to move through this one a little bit faster than usual. It's template rendering. There is nothing new. So we should all be able to follow along with this portion. Let's Control C, and then let's make here static. And then we need CSS, we need JS, and then touch, static, CSS, main.css. And honestly, I'm probably not going to put any CSS because I want to make sure that I finish before the meeting today. So now we got JS. Okay, so I see our static files has been created. I want to make sure that I make templates inside of my user app. Templates. Okay, and I want pages. And I want touch, user app, templates. And then let's go with we need sign up. HTML. We need sign in.
You're not making that in the pages folder.
No, I am not. Thank you. And we got sign in, and let's just say our layout. And again, we want pages here, so let me add that in there. Okay, so now we got layout, sign in, sign up, and let's see task. All right, so let's go into our layout. Let's make our HTML functionality. So there's our HTML boilerplate. Let's load the static let's say task app. Then we want our link here, which we want static, and then we want CSS main .css. Same thing down here. I want static, and then I want JS main.js. Okay, so now I want to make a block content. Step 12, step 20. I don't know what that is in reference to, so I'm gonna keep moving forward. So that takes care of that. So let's go to the sign up process. Let's say I want to extend, and I want to extend layout. Oh, nope, I want to extend pages. Layout.html. I want a content block. And inside of that content block, I want a form. And in this form, I'm going to need an input type text, which is going to have the ID of email. And actually, let's make this type, I think it's type email, we'll see. Okay, input ID. So something like React makes this part easier, better, more streamlined. I will answer that as soon as I'm done here before I lose my train of thought. Please remind me in case I miss it. Okay, and I don't need the type text. And then I need the input of ID, and then this is going to be password. And let's make it type password. Okay, let's close off the form. I want an onSubmit method. And this is going to be sign up. And I'm going to pass in the event. Okay, perfect. Form, submit, sign up. Nice. So now let's open up JS. Where did you go? JS. Okay, so const sign up, and it's going to take in an event. And oh, that's not proper JavaScript. Okay, let's do event.prevent default, and hopefully this time it behaves correctly. All right, and then I'm going to have to bring in that Axios tag as well. So Axios.post, and this post is going to sign up. And in the body, I'm going to want an email key. Actually, before we do that, let's grab document, so email. We want name equals, and we want password equals. Let me see. Okay, that's not working the way I wanted to. Well, I know why. I'm so sorry. Juice is not worth the squeeze. Okay, so document get element by ID. There's going to be an ID, and then I want the value. Okay, so now I want, in this case, the ID would be email. In this case, the ID would be name, and then password. And I probably want a bunch of LUTs on the other side of that. Okay, so Axios.post, sending the post. I want my email to be an email. I want my name to be a name, and I want my password to be a password. Okay. So after it does that, let's see. So I can now look at my views, see what's going to happen if he signs up. So if the if the sign up fails, then it will be a false. Otherwise, it will not be false. So that's all I'll check. I'll check if it's false. I apologize, everyone. My mouse seems to be freaking out at the worst time. Okay, perfect. Da-da-da. So now let's go to JS. And now that I have all this, I can do a .then. Or actually, I think it's a .catch first. Catch. I'm going to bring in my error. And then I want my .then, which will take in my response. And then if response.data dot success is not equal to false, then window dot location href, I think, and then href will go to let's make it slash sign in, and then put in a slash after that. And let's say else window dot location dot reload. Okay, so now let's look up Axios real quick. Not gonna make it. I'm not gonna make it. Let's see. Da-da-da, Axios, the script. Let's grab that. How is your IDE not screaming right now? What do you mean by that? Did I do something wrong? Da-da-da, got that.
No, that was from earlier when you were filling out the form. Because you didn't have the closing form tag. Usually the IDS code just screams.
Oh, I get you. Let's close this. We don't need that. On. Okay, we'll need URLs, we'll need views. The rest we'll need, but I won't need SQL anymore. You want to terminate running process. Oh, hello. I never said I wanted to terminate the running process. All right. So okay, it sends the request to sign up, and that should have a URL. So that goes into sign up, which then goes into the views. So it allows the user to sign up. So after the user signs up, it will then go to sign in. So let's try to make the views that will actually render some templates. So def sign up, and let's take in the request. And in the request, I want to do return render, and what I want to render is going to be the request, and I want that request to render sign up HTML. So let's go with pages slash sign up dot HTML. Okay, via sign in, it's going to take the request. It's going to return render request. And then it's going to take in pages slash sign in. Oh. Okay, so It goes to sign in, but currently sign in does not exist. Neither does the other. So let's do path. Views dot sign up. Name. Sign up form. And then let's do
You got sing up,
sign in.
you got sing up form of. No, sorry, next left views dot sing up.
Oh, thank you. And let me change that in my views as well. But what was I? URLs. All right. So now we go to sign in. Now we bring in the views dot sign in and then name. Sign in form. Let's provide the same form that we have in sign up to sign in. But now we won't need this name field. And instead of sign in, we'll go to, instead of sign up, we'll go to sign in. And now let's create that real quick. Now it's going to sign in. As we previously mentioned, we won't need name. This is going to the sign in URL. Have sign in JS. What are you talking about?
Line 40 on the JavaScript. It says singing.
Oh, thank you. All right, so now that's going to go to sign in. It's going to send the email. It's going to send the password, catch the error. And let me just say what views does. So when it goes into sign in, it returns sign in if it's true or false. So now in JS, I can't ask success. I need to ask sign in. Yeah, I know. Have at it. Go ahead. Perfect. So then that brings sign in. I don't want it to go there anymore. Now I want it to go to tasks. And now when it goes to tasks, I need to build that view still. Path. Tasks. Use dot user tasks. And name being tasks. All right, and now I go to the view. I'm on mouse. Okay, we need an API view. Oh my God. And this is only supposed to take in a GET request. And if this was tasks, I believe I need it. No, I need the user tasks. And it takes in the request. Now I'm going to grab all my tasks, and that's going to be a list of task.objects.get, or actually .filter, where user is equal to request.user. And that's going to grab all of the tasks where the user is the same one as the one that's currently signed in. And then I'm going to return that in my data. So now return render. And in render, I want request. I want pages / tasks.html. And then I want a dictionary of tasks, which is going to be holding my list of tasks. And before I go through there, I need to add the .values there. Boom, so it turns it into a list, sends it back, grabs a request.user, sends it into tasks, and in tasks, I can now use the extends function. Oh, hello. I need to bring in pages slash layout HTML. Why would you do that? Okay. There we go. And then I need a block content. And in this block content, I'm going to say that I want a for loop. So let's say for task in tasks. And what I want to print, it's going, let's make a UL actually. And in here, let's have an li of task.title. And let's close that li. Okay, so in theory, this all should work, but I am definitely expecting to run into some errors. Okay, so running the server worked successfully. And let's actually put that side by side so that we could see the type of request that we'll be receiving. Oh, wow, I didn't even put a submit button in that. That's embarrassing. Input type. Submit. There it is, sign up. And probably a couple of placeholders would have been nice. But that would be a little too fancy right now. I will do that if we have time. Let's see, we have 8:37 already. All right, so let's do, I don't know, that Avalo. Is the whole type submit vise button just a preference thing? So if you do an input type submit, it will actually submit the form. Whereas if you create a button, you have to create an on-click function. It's, I guess, preference up to you whether you want to do a form submission or an on-click function. And then let's just do, and then I press enter. Let's see. Oh no, it gave me an error. Let's see what the error is. Okay, go to my console, filter 404, main.js. Okay, so it's failing to recognize my static files. So I got my static, got JS, and I definitely do have main.js. Okay, maybe I should kill the server and rerun it. Okay, error 44 aborted because it couldn't find CSS main.css.
Did you can you pull up your settings? Because your static file is outside, or excuse me, your static folder is outside your app folder.
Good point. I
So
didn't
you
give it a
either have to
static
put it in the
directory.
dirs of static or move that static folder inside of the app folder.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, there you go.
Moving too fast around. Good. Static files. Dirs. And then we want base directory slash static. Okay, let's see. Running the server. Let's refresh this. Okay, now I recognized it. And then go. No. Request failed with 403 forbidden. Hello. Why 403? 403 forbidden.
Csrf token.
Well, we're using the Django REST framework, so technically that shouldn't be a problem here. Let's see. It goes to URLs, goes to sign up, then goes to views. Am I currently logged in? I am currently logged in.
Someone mentioned line 18, you're using sing in the chat. I don't know where that refers to. Oh, in the JS.
Line 18, I'm using Sing. Yes, I am. Thank you. God. Okay. Well, I guess it's important to understand where the error is coming from. So to get for sign up, dot post slash sign up. Oh, I see. Nope, I don't see actually, but let's try that. Four, three. Okay. Type error. All right, we got time. Let's see. So it sends everything. It's just not even going in there. So let's go into URLs. Okay. So sign up is all lowercase. So let me make sure that's what I have in my JS. Okay, so I do have that in my JS, all lowercase. Okay, so go to my URLs, go to sign up, then it goes into my views. And my views for sign up, user sign up, it takes in all of that. All right, so why could this be failing? Let me see. It's not taken in the post method. Interesting. Okay. So maybe it is a Csrf thing. So let's see if I do Csrf exempt. And I might have to look this up.
Yeah, you'll have to, I think you have to import that from Django, the Csrf.
Yeah.
Or
Do you
if you haven't
remember?
You
already.
could you can add it to your form as a Django template to just send it with a form.
I could. Let me try both ends. See which one works best. Let's go with sign up. Come on, where are you at? And let's erase this part or just comment it out for now. And sign up. Let's do Csrf token.
Yeah, I think that should work. All right. Let's try this. Kill the server. Go to localhost. Run server. Refresh it. And let's go. Axios error request failed. Why is this giving me a request? I love the
failed?
live debugging, by the way, because it makes me feel better about all the things I tripped over this weekend.
Yeah, I have an idea. We could probably eliminate the possibility that the form is at fault here. Maybe we could look at this in Postman and see if we can send the same information and see if we get anything back, because it might be a problem with the form.
It could
Possibly.
be. Let's see. So we got sign up. Let's go into headers. I got my. So let's say that I take away the Csrf token, right? Because that's not supposed to be in there technically. And I'm gonna take off both of these. And I just want to pass. Okay, so we got a post. Let's say I send it. Gives me an error. Oh. Multi-value dict key error. Super. So that is happening from the views.
Did you send in a super attribute or something?
No. So let me check this. If super and request data. And then request data. Okay. Okay, so that one, it took it in without the Csrf token in the headers, as well as without the session ID. So let's try refreshing this getter. And let's say Avila. This is awesome. All right. Because fell the status for
So
3.
it's probably something with Axios.
Well,
if you
that's
wanna
the
Yeah.
Django REST frameworks is supposed to fix that up for us so that we don't have to worry about that and work properly.
Okay.
Where Axios is able to ping it. But you are right. There's probably something.
Well, you could do the CSRF exempt thing. You just got to import it.
Yeah.
I agree that you shouldn't have had to do that though. That makes sense.
Yeah.
This is why
let's try
backend is
this.
better than front end. Don't do anything with JavaScript.
Front Django dot the views dot decorators.
Yeah, views.decorators.csrf. Import
Yeah.
csrf exempt.
Nice. Let's see, add CSRF exempt. Is this supposed to have the method afterwards?
No,
Can't
I don't think
remember.
so. No, just the csrf exempt.
Awesome, let's try that. Well, now it's a WSGI object, so it doesn't have data. So I would have to reconstruct the entire function. Well, you know what? Let's see. Django, JavaScript, CSRF. Let's see if that does. That more than likely won't do the trick, but it's worth a shot. I think it's Axios dot headers. Let me see. There you go. Axios dot defaults. dot headers dot common. And I want that at X, C, S, or F token. And I want that to be equal to CSRF token. I think this is the way it works with Django. So let's check this out. Oh, that didn't. Okay. All right, well, unfortunately, I'm running out of time. Before I push this code, I'll push this code up for what I have right now, and then I'll figure out how I get this working. Once I figure out how to get this working, I'll re-push the code back up, and I'll notify everybody in the Slack channel. That way you guys will have that code available to you, and I'll do my best to comment out what's actually going on as far as being able to give the Csrf token. Does anyone have any questions over everything we went over up to the part where I just completely messed this demo up?
No, I mean, I wasn't kidding when I said earlier, I like the live debugging, honestly, like you're human, just like we are, and it's nice
Yeah.
to see like, I don't know, makes me feel more confident when I'm just like Googling stuff for an hour and,
Yeah, it happens. I will get this working though, I promise. Awesome, guys. Well, if there's no questions over anything that we went over today, time is 8:52. Let's take an 8-minute break and be back. Oh, sorry, it's 10:52. Let's take an 8-minute break and then be back by 11 so that we could be in time for Rod's presentation. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys in 8 minutes. Okay, perfect. So we're able to figure out what was going on with Axios. Axios did not have a Csrf token. So we went to the Django documentation, and the Django documentation, it tells us that if we're using JavaScript to contact the Django server, we can use this function to grab our Csrf token. After we grab our Csrf token, we give it to the variable of Csrf token here on line 16. But Axios still didn't have the Csrf token as far as it wasn't holding it. So we go into Axios, then we go into its defaults, then into its headers, and then into common. And inside common, we create the X Csrf token header and make it the value of the Csrf token that was provided to us by the document. So now that it has that, it's able to actually conduct post request. So let's try to get this from the very start. Ooh, okay. I do not currently have a sign out. So I may have to kill this real quick and rerun it. And let's see what we can do. So we got, let's make a new one. Let's say, and let's make his name. And then let's give him the password. Okay. And then we got the form of Raul.com. And now we give him the password and submit. Perfect. So now we're into this tasks area, but we see that nothing's rendering, and that's because this specific new user does not have any tasks. So let's say I want to create a task. So let's say task 1. I come over, let's say this is my new task. And this is coming from the tasks HTML. Where you at? And the task HTML, we got this form. When I click the on submit, it will then trigger the create task function. So let's go to JS and go to the create task. And the create task, it's going to prevent the default. Then it's going to grab the values for both of those input fields and send a post request to tasks. It'll send the title and description, catch the error, and then reload the page if the request was successful. So let's go to the views to look at this. So it goes into the user tasks. So now I put this if request is get method, and it'll return all of the tasks in the database that belong to this user. Otherwise, if it's a post, it's going to create a task with the title corresponding to the title being sent in the data, the description corresponding to the description being sent in the data, and then the user corresponding to request.user. So when I click submit, I see task 1. Let's say task 2, and this is something else. When I send that, it posts it, refreshes. So we see the post request coming in. It saves it, returns the success is true. And then at that point, JavaScript sees that success was true, and it conducts a window.reload, which then triggers the GET request. The last thing that we need to do is demonstrate how to log out. So let's go to our layout, and let's just bring in a button near the footer. And let's just say sign out. And then let's go on click. And let's go with sign out. So now we need to go to main.js, and we know that that's going to be a sign out name for the function. It's not going to take in an event nor any arguments. And now all we have to do is send a post request. And for this post request, it's going to be going to the URL of sign out.
Actually, it's going to sing out. Well, in your JavaScript, it's sing out.
I did it again.
I think Francisco really just wants to sing to us today. If you could do the rest of the lesson in song, it'll be great.
Say again.
If you could do the rest of the lesson in song, that would be fantastic.
And then we want to alert. You guys wouldn't like my saying, trust me. It's not nice. And then .then and response. And let's see what the response looks like. So I go back to my views. When my user log out, I get sign out is true. So now when I go, and it is sign out, not sing out. So now I could say if response.data sign out, then I can window.location .href and make that equal to an empty quotation marks. So now I refresh, click on sign out, and it should have taken me back to empty quotation marks, but it looks like field ID expected a number, but got Django.contrib.models request that. Let's see, where is this coming from? Oh, because it went over to tasks. So this window location.href, I think I missed a slash. Okay, so one of my users had quite a bit of people, and I think it was the Gmail user. But let's say I just want to go to sign in. And I think it was sign in. Perfect. So now let's go to francisco@gmail.com and go with Francisco. Okay, and we see that task that we manually created that was not visible. Okay, other task. Hello, this is a task with a lot of A's. Click submit, creates it, click sign out, sends me back to the sign up form. Awesome. And then after that, it's just creating a couple of links so that it actually all works properly. And I can maneuver through this site accordingly. And then something else that I could do is I could grab the current user by creating a function. But for now, I'm just gonna wait on that current user view that we created. And once we start making a full stack application with React, this will become a little more evident on how we could use it to get user authenticity. Does anyone have any questions over anything that we covered today? Everyone feel pretty confident with everything we did today?
Oh yeah, I picked up 100% of everything you said.
Yeah, that's what YouTube's for, right? Okay, perfect. In that case, then that's pretty much all we have for today. That covered our lesson. I'll ensure that this gets pushed up to GitHub for demos and notes. And otherwise, thank you so much for joining me today. And you guys are good to go to lunch. Time is 11:30. Let's come back at 12:30. When will let me stop the recording and then I'll answer that question.